Good evening. Welcome to Live and Let Live. Yes, this is the hour where libertarians come to fill your airways with information about what's going on in Central Texas from a libertarian viewpoint. Hi, everybody. I'm your host, Rock Howard, and it's a pleasure to be back hosting Live and Let Live. We've got an interesting show tonight. We have some interesting news about what's going on with the Libertarian Party, and we have one of our leading candidates, Tom Davis, here to talk about his candidacy. And so we'll be visiting with Tom this hour, and I think you'll find it'll be an engaging and interesting conversation, and we certainly hope you can spend a little time with us and find out more about our candidates in Central Texas. All right, so what's the Libertarian Party all about? Well, the Libertarian Party is really a lot about what this show is about, and that's live and let live. That's a way to organize our society, organize our government, so that individuals really are given the preeminent position and power as our country was originally designed for. We think this is something that's less and less prevalent in today's society, which seems to be more and more dominated by government. But fortunately, our economic engine and the entrepreneurial attitude of Americans has kept the ability for a lot of us to enjoy a lot of freedoms. Of course, there are many people in our societies who have precious few freedoms. There's 2 million people in prison. There's several more million people who are in virtual prison from poverty and other denial of access to capabilities where they could live the lives they want to live. There's a lot we can do to improve our situation. And then there's the rest of the world, too, where most people don't enjoy the freedoms that we do. And so the great experiment here in America continues, and it's really up to us to show that this system of government, system of liberties, of freedom, and self-rule can work. It's a fairly new experiment on the face of the earth, only a couple hundred years old, but we still think there's a lot to learn, and we're trying to learn it every day. Okay, let's look at some news here. First, last couple of weeks we had the local conventions for libertarians. These were the places where people to get together and actually vote for candidates. And it's a very interesting process in the Libertarian Party. We get together. This time we had our meetings at the Travis County Courthouse. And we get to vote on our candidates who have filed for nomination to be candidates for the Libertarian Party. And every candidate must face not only other candidates that may emerge in his or her race for office, but also the prospect that libertarians may vote for none of the above, i.e., no candidate at all. And unlike in the Democratic or Republican primaries, if none of the above beats the candidate, then that candidate is knocked off the ballot. So this is a way that our members can be active in the party and really take a close look at our candidates and make sure they're going to do the very best job in representing the libertarian viewpoint. And sure enough, this time out, we have a record number of candidates locally, but one of the candidates did not quite pass muster. It was very exciting. It actually turned out to be a tie vote, and according to our rules, you have to have a majority. You have to have more votes for the candidate than for none of the above. And so sadly, this candidate did not make the ballot, and so will not appear as a libertarian in the upcoming November election. But that's the way it goes in the Libertarian Party. Let's see, on Saturday last, we had, which was March 18th, we had the county convention, and we elected a slew of candidates, and we're going to go through these candidates shortly. And these ranged from constable to sheriff to all the way up to state representative. And there we have a little tape highlight of the meeting. There is David Eagle, who was the presider of the county convention. And David did a great job. In fact, David was elected as our new Travis County Libertarian Party chair. So then today we had our district convention, and there we nominated Nancy Neal for Board of Education, and we elected Tom Davis, tonight's guest, for our candidate for State Senate here in District 14. So let's, Gary, let's take a look at the Libertarian ballot that you'll be looking at here in Travis County. Here are all the Libertarians that will be running in local races. A few of them, some of them are running for different state rep positions and so forth, so you might not see all these names on your particular ballot. But I'm very excited about our slate of candidates. At the top of the list, we have for U.S. Senator Mary J. Ruart, who is a world-renowned libertarian who's written many books, including a very popular book called Healing Our World, which is a great discussion of how libertarianism really is a form of humanitarianism that allows people to really reach their utmost in self-potential. And it's a great book. And she is going to be our U.S. Senator candidate, and I think will do a great job heading up our ticket here in Texas. Also, we have Michael Davis, who's our U.S. Rep candidate for the 10th Congressional District. Michael is a veteran. He was in the Gulf War, and he's a very engaging candidate. I hope you had a chance to see him here on Live and Let Live a few weeks ago. He really presents well, and he's got a lot to say about how we ought to be running our federal government. So I sure hope we get to send Michael to Washington. I'm sure he wants your vote. Railroad Commission, we have Carolyn Fields from San Antonio and Anthony Garcia from Harris County, Houston area, running. Let's see. Yes, Supreme Court. We have 3 candidates for Supreme Court. And in fact, there was a poll recently amongst lawyers about who they support. And our candidate Lance Smith did surprisingly well. If the lawyers of the state had anything to do with it, Lance Smith would be on the Supreme Court in Texas, which Lance is a great guy. I would love to see him on the Supreme Court. But all these guys deserve your support. Court of Criminal Appeals, we have Rife Scott Kindler running. And tonight's guest, State Senator, District 14, Tom Davis. We'll get to Tom in just a moment. More candidates on the local front. Our state senator candidates, District 47, Michael Badnarik, who has been a guest on this show. District 48, Philip Durgan, who appeared often on this show a couple of years ago when he was campaign manager for Vince May. There's District 49. Oh, it looks like I was nominated.
Good for you.
Congratulations. Thank you, Tom. So I'll be running for District 49. And so I'll have to be a guest on this show someday.
And I get to grill you.
That would be fair enough. And then Vince May, perennial candidate and one of the Libertarians' leading lights. Vince, by the way, is the editor of our local email newsletter and does a great job with that. And we'll talk about that in just a minute. All right, other candidates. State Board of Education, District 10, Nancy Neal. Nancy is a longtime homeschooler and a very strong advocate for improvements in education, mainly through privatization and allowing people to have individual control over education. Darren Roush is our candidate for sheriff. He's a very sharp young man and makes a great candidate. And Jerry Chandler is running for tax assessor collector. And it would be great to have a libertarian in charge of that position. Constables, Elaine Hunt is running in Precinct 2. It looks like Elaine's going to be able to run a fairly active campaign. And James Branham, who's running a very active campaign in Precinct 5. And James is looking for more volunteers and more resources. He feels he has a real shot to make some noise in that constable race. So please don't hesitate to contact me or James and get involved with that campaign. And finally, James Bednar, who's running for Justice of the Peace in Precinct 1. So there you have it. That's the Libertarian Party slate for the Central Texas area. And we certainly hope you can get out there and support this slate. We certainly have room for volunteers. Your money's welcome. The thing we need most, though, is just spread the word that Libertarians offer another choice. Okay, let me move ahead with a couple other things. As I said, David Eagle is the new Travis County chair, and you can contact the Travis County Party at the phone number on your screen, 467-1776. And David is a longtime Libertarian, and he was actually the very first chief of staff for a Libertarian State House caucus that was in New Hampshire a few years back. And we were lucky to have him here in Austin, and I'm sure he'll do a great job. We also have Gina Evans, who is now the Libertarian Party secretary, And Pat Waddell has been reelected as Travis County Treasurer. Pat's done a great job for many years and will continue to do so, I'm sure. Now, if you'd like to see David Eagle in action, set your calendar for April 15th. He's going to be the host here at Live and Let Live. He's been a guest of mine several times. He's a really articulate young man, and he will be hosting the third Saturday of the month for the foreseeable future, and I am still going to be hosting the fourth Saturday. And, of course, Terry Liberty Parker will be hosting the first Saturday. We'll see how that rotation goes, and hope that brings yet more perspectives and interest to the show. And then finally, one other note. Thanks, Gary. Gary's put up our party meeting times. First Tuesday of the month, 7 p.m. It's going to be at the Buffet Palace, 1012 West Anderson. That's just off the 183, right at the, if you know where the Hobby Lobby is, it's right near there. And we plan to meet there in the front room. They have a nice little room there that we're going to meet in. We also have working group meetings, don't forget, on the 20th of every month, where we get together and we do various things. For example, we sent out postcards announcing our convention. We got that done, and we've done other kinds of activities at these business meetings. That's the 20th of every month. You can get the latest information about what's going on not only in the party, but in other affiliated groups around town by visiting our website. That's at www.austinliberty.org, and you can check it out and see what's going on. Probably the biggest activity in the April time frame is our annual Tax Day protest. That's April 17th this year, and we certainly can use your help getting out and getting the word out that there is a better way to run our country, and this pernicious income tax system is not your friend. Okay, so that's the highlights of what's going on locally. Let's get right to our guest. Tonight's guest is State Senate candidate for District 14. He's Tom Davis, very articulate and very interesting candidate, a real departure for the Libertarian perspective here, Central. Tom, it is really a pleasure to have you aboard here.
Thank you.
Okay, so why did you decide to run for office?
Oh, there's a lot of reasons. One is that I am just tired of the people who've been in office forever coasting back to another term in office without being challenged at all. And I wanted to see the people who hold power over our lives challenged in some way. Another reason I chose to run is that I saw that libertarianism needs to be pushed, needs to be examined, needs to be put out into the public eye even more, and I thought I could do some towards that. Another reason that I chose to run is that people of my religious path, pagans, aren't represented in society as a whole, and I decided that it's time we started being represented and wanted to do that.
Well, that's very interesting. Why don't you say a little bit more about the paganism and how does that fit with libertarianism?
Well, paganism is a large umbrella term that covers a lot of religions, sort of like monotheist is a large umbrella term that covers a lot of religions. Specifically, the pagan religion I'm a part of is Wicca, and our only rule of morality, for lack of a better word, is if it harm none, do as you will. And that's just a rephrasing of the libertarian point of view.
Well, it does sound a lot like live and let live.
Or, as Terry Parker likes to say, as long as you don't threaten or pose a credible, you don't do violence or pose a credible threat to violence, do what you want. Or the old maxim of my right to swing my arm goes as far as your nose. So, all of those.
Well, that's very interesting. Now, I can see how that kind of fits from your particular standpoint of philosophy and morality. Do you think that system really works?
Yes, I do. We just came back for like 3 hours ago from a camp out where we spent since Thursday living that principle. We go out into the forest to camp so that we can live in a society for a short while where that is the rule. And it works beautifully. I mean, there are always going to be people who, for some reason or another, choose to violate the rule. We have ways of taking care of that, but it works wonderfully well. It's old Heinlein's, an armed society is a polite society. In our case, the armor we have is simply the conviction that this is how one ought to live, and it does work.
So we're really still talking about a society that's bound by laws,
Yes.
bound by traditions,
Yes.
bound by customs.
Just not very many of them.
Right. So it's something that's actually, those laws, I imagine, are a little bit easier to understand than the 6 million laws that govern us currently.
Oh, yes, and a little easier to live with, a little harder for the government to do unpleasant things to us over.
Well, let's talk about that. So you're talking about law enforcement.
I'm talking about, it's not really even law enforcement anymore. Law enforcement is when a policeman makes a valid stop for a valid offense and protects us from, I'm not supposed to bang on the table, protects us from that offender. That's valid. What I'm talking about are what I call the imperial stormtroopers, the DEA, who run into a house on no other pretense than some junkie's possibly wrong tip. When the owner of the house tries to defend himself, they kill him. This has happened. This is not theory. This has happened. A woman whose husband was killed in front of her face, she was dressed only in her underwear, and they dragged her off to interrogate her. It was the wrong house, but did that matter? No. If you look at what the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms did just up the road in Waco, if you look at the real evidence, not the stuff that the government's putting out to protect its assets, you have the fact that the government really was the aggressor in that. That's not law enforcement. That's imperial stormtroopers.
So do you think that that's something that the legislature can change, that the people really can change through the political process?
The Texas legislature cannot change federal law. I agree. But in several states already, in Alaska, in California, in Oregon, in New Mexico, the state government, or in the case of New Mexico, the state governor, stood up to the feds and said, no, not in my state. Texas is one of the few, if not the only state, that has a history of defending itself successfully against a foreign aggressor. We're talking about Mexico in the case of the Texas Revolution. And I see no reason why we can't do it again, except this time the aggressor is in Washington and not some other country. The state government has an obligation, and the people in the state government have an obligation to stand up and say, no, not in my state you don't.
So the flip side to having a simplified approach to laws and a law enforcement approach that is more respectful of individuals is that we would enjoy more individual liberty.
That is certainly the right way to do it.
Now, what's in it for, not just for the people who might feel like, well, I'm well off, I'm living a good life, I have enough liberty because I've got a big enough bank account where I can do what I want. What's really in it for, Joe Sixpack or people who are not that well off? Is liberty something that should be on their plate of interest?
Nobody's liberty is that certain. Anybody's door can be broken in at any time by the stormtroopers. By mistake, who cares if it's a mistake? You're just as dead. None of us is really safe until all of us are safe. So, as you call him, Joe Sixpack is just as much at risk as the wealthy person and just as much at risk as the poor person. Now, I know in this society, poor people tend to have laws enforced against them harder because they can't afford justice. And that's a whole nother ball of wax we could get into. How can anybody be truly free when someone else is being wrongly convicted of a crime? It just doesn't work.
Okay, the other things that were particularly interesting to me about your candidacy is that you've taken a hard look not only at society and how we organize our lives, but really about the political process as well. What would you think is the one or two things that would make the most difference to actually help people be engaged in our process and make it worth their time to pay attention to it?
Well, right now, if someone wants to register to vote, they've got to do it weeks in advance. if someone could go to the polling place, prove their identity, and link up to a central computer system so you could say, I'm not registering in 3 places, register immediately, vote right then, a lot more people would be enfranchised. Also, if people were able to initiate legislation, right now, a few hundred people in a few little buildings scattered around the United States, the state capitals, can initiate legislation. We can't. We can beg our legislators to initiate legislation for us. If they choose to listen to us, they may do it sometimes. But with initiative, that is the right for citizens to petition the government to put this issue on the ballot, and then the referendum that goes with it, putting the issue and voting on it on the ballot, we'd all have a larger say in the process. There are some other things, too, that computers have made possible that weren't possible before. The ability to have what's called instant runoff voting. I'm all for that. Essentially what happens is you go to the polling place once, and instead of voting for one candidate and then going home, you vote for candidates in sequence. Turn that in, and then the computer system can say, let's run the election once. Everybody who got a majority of votes in the first place, anybody wins. If not, then we go to the ones that got a plurality. We already know what your preference is. You've already voted for them, so you don't have to go back, spend county money, state money, federal money for a runoff election. You just do it again right there, and you know the winner that night. Much easier, much cheaper, much simpler, and just much more rational.
So that's the instant runoff system
Yes.
that we've heard about. Yeah, we've had some discussions on this show about instant runoff. It basically, you go to the poll, and if there are 3 candidates, for example, you get to rank them 1, 2, 3. So you just, it's that simple for the voter. But you're saying, well, it has a lot of positive effects. One is you find out the results right away. You don't have to have a runoff. 2, that information is actually valuable. It allows people to vote for the candidate they really want as their first choice and not have to do the lesser of 2 evils in the case of 3 candidates, right?
Mm-hmm.
That would certainly be a good thing. And I think another thing about instant runoff that's very fascinating is once you get used to voting in that way, you could think about bodies like the legislature where you could reorganize it, where instead of voting for just one person out of this whole large body, maybe you could vote for several candidates in a larger district. So if there were 20 candidates running and 4 of them would get elected, for example, and you could vote for 4, that would be a different way of getting better proportionality out of our legislators. So, okay, well, that's very interesting. There's so we've talked a little bit about laws. We've talked about liberties. We talked about lawmaking. And you mentioned computerization of the government, where we're really way behind in terms of using technology to improve our government. But, of course, one way that the government's trying to improve things through computers is through information handling.
Information gathering, you mean?
Well, that is the problem. There's a flip side.
Yes.
Why don't you talk about that for a moment? Well, do you think the state government should be the source of information about our lives?
What do you mean by the resource? The place where it's all kept?
Well, kept, monitored, controlled. What is your feeling about it? How much should governments know about its citizens?
Well, it has to know your name and your address in order to allow you to register to vote, or once you register to vote, to know that. There may be other small bits of information. For example, I believe it's legitimate to license people to operate motor vehicles. They're dangerous. To be able to prove, yes, I have trained to do it, I know how to do it, okay, you're licensed to do it. That's legitimate. But not much more.
Okay. Is there information that you think that could be shared through using computer systems that currently it's only done through the government, that could be done maybe privately?
What do you mean by that? Again, information to be shared.
Well, let's take a look at what's going on right now. I know a few people probably in the last week's got something in their mailbox called a census form.
Yes, or census volume.
Right. And now I was one of the lucky ones. I got the short form. It only had 20-something questions on it, or 30, whatever it was. I filled out the first one, which is how many people are in my household, but I don't intend to fill out the rest. Have you seen the long form?
Oh, I got the long form.
You got the long form.
After a while, I got tired enough, I've started writing things not on your life.
Well, what were some of the questions like on the long form?
Oh, of course, they want to know your income, your sources of income, how much of your income comes from this or that or the other type, alimony, job, stocks, etc. Just all kinds of invasive things. As far as I'm concerned, the government, because the Constitution requires it, has the right to ask for census information. But as soon as I have said two, I'm finished.
Okay, so you're saying there's two people in your household, so you're
Right.
not, you don't think they have the right to know what race you are?
Not really.
You think the government really should be designing programs depending on what race people are?
That's a tough one. There are some situations where possibly race has been an issue in the past and corrections need to be made. But I'm not going to say yes as a blanket statement. I think they need to be looked at individually. And if one particular situation needs that, then I would say yes to it. But yes to everything, no, absolutely not.
Well, what's interesting, of course, is the census. The reason for the census is so that they can set up voting districts. So it's really so that people can be properly apportioned for elections.
Two would do fine for that.
Right.
That's all they need.
Well, so even though they say that this information is highly guarded, the question is, what is it? How does this all these 63 other questions help them make for better elections?
It doesn't.
No, it doesn't. Then what is the census doing with this information?
I wish I knew.
With this highly secret information they claim no one will ever know.
Right. We're just putting it on tapes, and someday we may need to arrest you. Oh, no.
Okay, so if anybody's not getting the drift here, the Libertarian Party has very much come out and said we're against the current form of the census. We think it is practically your duty not to give information other than just how many people are in your house. Now, I have to tell you, there is a $100 fine involved if you refuse to answer the census, and there's a $500 fine if you put false information.
Well, that's unequal prosecution. If you got the short form and I got the long form, to require me to give more information than you gave is unequal application of the law, and that's illegal.
Oh, well, yes, that's a good point. I mean, fairness is one of the simpler forms of the law. So, but a computer chose your name and not my name, so it was random.
Whoopee.
Well, this will be very interesting. I know one fellow who was so put out by the census that he actually called up the Census Bureau and said, "Where can I send my $100 check? I am not going to fill this thing out, so I just want to send in my $100." They didn't know what to do with this guy. Now, the good news is they've only prosecuted 2 people, I believe, this last century for not filling out their census form.
Oh, I'm sure they'll come by and counsel me very carefully about my responsibility to do that.
I heard there was questions on the long form that were like, have you felt good this last year? Or have you felt in a better frame of mind? And have you shared the pain of the president and things like that?
If there was, I'd stopped reading long before that.
Okay. All right. So we've been talking here with Tom Davis. Tom is candidate for state senate in District 14. Who are you running against in that district?
I'm running against Gonzalo Barrientos, who is the existing state senator candidate, existing state senator, and who's been there for a long time. He knows all the ins and all the outs of all the politics. But there's something wrong with that if you come down to it. I'm tired of the people who determine the course of my life being professional course of my life determiners. I'd like to have somebody who knows what life is like out here. Yeah, well, me or whoever.
So you're not looking for this to start a political career for yourself?
No. I think the only disqualification for office ought to be wanting it.
Well, I actually agree with that. I am very much in favor of citizen legislators. Did I say that right? Citizen legislators.
Now, if they want a computer to pick somebody at random to go to the State House. But you got to give him, time off for good behavior and let him go after a couple of years.
So for the State House, you would just have the computer pick people at random to come and be legislator.
I don't know. I think anything's better than what we have now.
Yeah, well,
I mean, what
would
happens-
definitely be unequal,
Yeah.
unequal and unfair.
If you stop to think about it, there's three kinds of people who can be legislators. People who are already rich, because the legislature pays next to nothing in terms of money.
Oh, but the pension benefits are good.
If you can make it. That's called cash flow.
Right.
Number two is people who are willing to live on next to nothing. And number three is people who work for an employer who's willing to count their state capital time as work time. That's dangerous.
So, well, at least in Texas, we have the notion that the legislature is only in session for 5 months out of 2 years.
They're only in formal session, yes, but if you go up to the Capitol any day, you'll see committee having meetings that day. You'll see that Mr. Barrientos, for example, is chairman of the Capital Area Metropolitan Planning Organization. They meet every month or so and then have separate side meetings. They're not just in here for a little bit. They have to put a lot of time in. And people are not compensated to the point that citizens can be legislators.
So you feel like you could take the time and be an effective legislator for some short period of time, a few years?
For a restricted period of time, yes. For a long period of time, no. I'd either have to go bankrupt or sell myself. I'm not going to do that.
So that's a very interesting perspective, because a lot of people look at the ballot and they go, well, these people clearly are professionals, and then we're looking at these other people that are amateurs, and I'm going to go for the professional. But really, for their self-interest, that's just about bass backwards, huh?
The professionals are the ones who know where the money is, how to get campaign donations, how to live right, I don't know. And do you really want people representing you who don't represent you, but rather they're campaign donors? I don't.
Okay, let's take a break and look at a couple of things going on here in the local party. We'll get back to Tom in just a second. I wanted to thank you viewers for stopping by and spending a few minutes with us. You're watching Live and Let Live here in Central Texas. This is the show for and by libertarians and Libertarian Party. And we just a couple tidbits you might want to jot down. We have a website, www.austinliberty.org, where you can find out what's going on, and not only about the Libertarian Party, but some of the other local organizations that we affiliate with and that we are involved with. We also have information specifically about the party and the party activities. And one of the best sources of information for the party and what's going on is our weekly email newsletter, the Austin Libertarian. It's very short. It's about a page of text. You get it once a week, rather. And our editor is Vincent May. So drop Vincent a note at vmay@wt.net, and he'll put you on the list. That list is carefully guarded, so no one else will have your name that you're getting this newsletter. And we'd be happy to send it to you. It's no charge for that. And, of course, we'd love you to come out to our meetings, join the LP, and do the other things as well. This last couple of weeks, we elected our candidates for office. We're going to have a pretty full slate here in Austin, Texas. You can check out some of the websites that some of our candidates have. For example, our candidate for U.S. House is Michael Davis, and there's his URL, www.michaeldavis2000.org. You can find out more about Michael. And we have plenty of other candidates with websites as well. Our guest tonight is Tom Davis. His website is www.tom-davis.org. And I've had the pleasure of visiting that website. You do that yourself?
Yes.
So you're computer literate.
I've been in computers since the late 60s. Yes.
Well, so have I. It's a career. So do you find that computers they've certainly had a big impact on your life, if that's been your career, and they've had an impact on mine. Do you think it's starting to have an impact on politics?
It is, but it's slow. There's always the computer vote counting process, but people have found some problems in those sometimes. They have bugs. People have actually found fraud in them. So we need to be really, really careful about that. It's always dangerous. Where power and money are concerned, double, triple check, yes. But there are a lot of ways that computers can help. We talked about the instant runoff voting and the other ways that people just couldn't do all the number crunching quick enough that a computer could to keep track of things. If every precinct had a link to a central computer, it would be impossible for someone to register here and then run register there and then run register there and vote all three places. The computer at the central point would know about it immediately, and as soon as they tried a second time, there I go banging the table again, sorry. But tried a second time, they get caught. So there are some valid places where computers could come in very handy, yes.
All right. We got about 25 minutes left in tonight's show. Let's get a little closer to home and talk about some of the challenges facing us here in Central Texas, since the office you're running for would represent this area in the State House.
Yeah, it represents about the southeast two-thirds of Travis County and then a little wedge down into Hayes County that terminates at San Marcos.
Okay.
And I'd like to point out that I've lived in both Travis and Hayes County for over 10 years each, so I know both counties and their needs.
So what are the top issues for that Central Texans you think are going to be caring about and that your candidacy is going to be focused on for Central Texas?
Well, have you been out on the highway lately?
I try to avoid that, actually.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. We all try to avoid it. The problem of transportation in this town is decades old. It goes back to the 70s when we had a chance to build a freeway system that would actually work into the future and chose not to for reasons I still don't understand. But we need to upgrade our transportation system somehow. Now, there's a lot of possible ways of doing it. We've got freeways as an alternative. We've got access feeder roads as an alternative. We've got light rail. We've got bus. And we need to do something, because if you get out on especially I-35 at what they like to call rush hour, I haven't seen anybody rush on that freeway at that hour yet, then you know what's wrong. There are a lot of possibles. Some people are talking about building more upper decks on 35. Some people are talking about building a toll road way out in the country. That's a silly idea. They're talking about spending $1 billion of your dollars to put a toll road so far out that nobody's going to want to use it. They're talking about putting barrier toll booths every couple of miles, and then they're saying, oh, and the long-haul trucks will use it. No. For one, they haven't thought about how to collect tolls. The northern system, if you give them a ticket at one end, you make them pay at the other, one stop at each end rather than stopping every couple of miles. If you look at the new Campo plan, which just came out last week, it says very explicitly in there that the purpose of State Highway 130 is to divert freight traffic. They try to tell us, oh, it's going to take all the load off I-35. There's even a billboard out on 35. Transportation studies have shown that it will take at most 10% of the traffic off I-35 today. We're increasing by 10% every couple of years. In other words, by the time it's built, it'll be obsolete. Well, we're used to that. That's the way government works. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say 10%, though. That sounds better than the projections for light rail taking traffic off of I-35.
Yeah, that's probably true. I've been in places where light rail works and works beautifully, mostly in Europe. Why does it work well in Europe? Well, let me take Paris for an example. I lived there for 7 months. And each block, the lower floor is shops. The upper floors are where people live. You don't have to go way out to the suburbs to get to your house and then way back into town to get to a shop. You go down, you go a couple of blocks, and you're where you need to be. That's where rail, light rail or subways or whatever works and works well. But Texans are used to getting it big. We're used to sprawling. And what's happened is we've gotten so used to the luxury of cars that we've built so far out that a single point transportation is going to help a few folks here and a few folks here. It's going to do nothing for the rest of the folks. So I'm not sure light rail is a solution either, except for the folks here and here.
Right. There is really the effectiveness question, and when the bus systems, for example, are so ineffective and are the closest stand-in we would have to light rail today, they're so ineffective. It makes you give pause, I'm sure.
Yeah, I mean, when you plan to go for a bus trip in Austin, you plan to take at least an hour, period, wherever you're going, because it'll take 2 or 3 changes. You'll have to go way out of your way to get back to where you wanted to go. This is a tough one, and it's going to take a lot more work than has been done so far. The solutions are not going to be easy. I can't just say, this is the answer, because it's going to take work.
It is going to take work. What's interesting, though, is that there seem to be, in some areas, actually the government actually seems to be working to make the problem worse, because by making the problem worse, getting the people more exasperated, they hope that people will want to spend more money and have the government do more to quote-unquote fix the problem.
Oh, we've got to have State Highway 130. There's too much traffic on 35. Yeah, you've got a point.
For example, just from my experience, this is something I lived in Los Angeles during the Olympics.
I'm sorry.
No, you shouldn't be, actually. It was widely heralded that the Olympics in Los Angeles, when I lived there, was going to basically shut down the city because the traffic was so bad in Los Angeles. And then the Olympics were going to come along. We had, thousands, tens of thousands of people from around the world were going to come to Los Angeles. It was going to be total gridlock. And what happened those 2 weeks while the Olympics happened was nothing short of a minor miracle. It was wonderful on the freeways. You could go anywhere lickety-split. It was not a problem at all. So what happened? Well, for 2 weeks, governments, industry, even schools did something incredibly radical. They shifted their times for letting people in and out by a few hours so that they could come a little early or come a little late, stay a little later, basically work around rush hours.
Government was rational?
It was incredible. No one expected that this would actually make a big difference, but it made a huge difference. And so I would suppose that if we could simply get University of Texas to think a little bit about their class scheduling, all the bureaucracy down in downtown for the city and state governments to think a little about their scheduling. I know we don't have to worry about the internet companies. They never get in before 10, 11, 12 o'clock in the morning anyway, so they're not a problem. We could make a huge impact on our traffic situation with a little creativity, a little more flex time.
And no contractors get paid. Oh, that can't happen. Can't have that.
So, I mean, these are simple solutions that haven't been tried that can really make a huge amount of difference. We should at least try them. We should at least have a big experiment. Maybe we can can't invite the Olympics here in Austin, but maybe we can jimmy something up that's just as dangerous sounding so that make people take notice and see if it works.
Sure.
So, there are a lot of things that can be done that haven't been tried, and the Libertarian Party would like to point these out. We'd like to get people supporting them. I mean, let's have a staggered work day here. Let's try it for a week. Let's see what happens. Well, transportation, there's another issue that goes right along with transportation, of course, and that is pollution.
Yes.
Boy, I almost laughed. It is so sad what happened this last week. The government's going to ban these substances that were supposed to be additives to our gasoline to make air pollution less of a problem. And do you know why these substances are being banned?
Probably because they make air pollution more of a problem.
No, they actually do help air pollution, but they increase water pollution just horribly. These additives have been showing up in our drinking supply, and they're extremely dangerous. And sure enough, Clinton federal government blaring all over the headlines, they're going to fix this problem. Well, guess what, folks? They caused this problem. Government caused this problem in the first place, and they're going to fix it. In fact, there were a number of things that Clinton came out this week where they were going to fix problems that were caused by the government in the first place. But you don't see that in the media. You don't see the in-depth reporting that would tell you, well, where did these problems come from in the first place? But that is one thing libertarians do know about. It's something called unintended consequences. So, here, by the way, speaking of our recent conventions, here's Tom Davis delivering his spiel to our large audience of voters and delegates to the conventions this actually weekend before last. That was March 18th. And Tom, that was a lot of fun. That was a great session. You gave a great speech, and so you'll be happy to know it was a unanimous vote today for you in terms of your candidacy. We were expecting great things from you. So we were talking briefly before Gary interrupted with the wonderful clip about pollution. You think there's much that can be done here locally?
Oh, there's always things that can be done. In fact, Austin is really one of the more advanced cities in terms of that because of their recycling emphasis. But there's a lot that still needs to be done. Automobiles are, as I'm sure we all know, well, vehicles, motor vehicles, the major source of air pollution. And as I think you and I were talking about just before the show, a very small minority of the vehicles are responsible for a huge amount of the pollution. I mean, how many times have you gone down the street and just had to fall back? And if I ride a motorcycle, I've got to fall even further back or I'm going to choke. There are some states that have requirements that if you have a visible emission above a certain temperature, 40, 50 degrees, that fails your inspection. It's not just the cursory inspection that Texas has now. It's a real, let's get serious about this. Now, this is one of those philosophical issues that sort of, which side does liberty fall on? Do I have the right to maintain or not maintain my car any way I wish? Or do I have the right to breathe unpolluted air? And you can find people who will argue both sides of that issue with good reason. I personally always am going to fall on the side of the people in that case, the side of the people having the right to breathe unpolluted air.
Yeah,
you and I.
Yeah, I think that I actually agree with that. I think that that can be handled under a property rights perspective. What do you think?
It's going to take some change. It's going to have to be governmentally imposed to begin with, because nothing is going to happen overnight. It'll take some work to get there. But after a while, my right to breathe clean air is going to allow me to walk over to somebody and, if necessary, with some force of, well, I won't say law, but some sort of persuasive force, say, you don't have the right to kill me with your emission.
Now, I don't know if our viewers are aware of this. This was in the paper just during the last week. There is a device out called the Stedman machine, built by Professor Stedman. I believe he's out in California at Berkeley, I believe. I'll check on that. And this is the device that you set it up beside the side of a road, and as the cars drive by, it can measure the emissions coming out of the cars quite accurately. It can detect those 6% of the vehicles that cause 50% of the pollution. And this device has been available for over 10 years, and governments have not been interested in using it to help solve air pollution, because this is a device that would, I guess, single people out as opposed to forcing solutions like they have today where everyone must suffer.
In other words, it would make them become libertarians, where we say you get what you pay for and you pay for what you get.
That's right. I mean, Stedman's original idea was if you have this machine and it can detect the offenders, we could simply send a bill to the people who are polluting the most and let them pay for the damage they're doing. Of course, the lawyers aren't happy with that approach. They'd much rather have class action suits involved somehow so they can get their fingers in the pie. But I'm happy to say the Stedman machine is now happily doing some good. It's being deployed privately. I guess they had to get permissions from some governments to do this, but it's being deployed privately, where they simply set the machine by the side of the road, and then they have a billboard down the road. And so you drive by the machine, and then the billboard either flashes happy face, sad face, frowning face, whatever, depending on how your emission test went. And at least you know then if your car is an offender or not, and you need to do something about it. And certainly this could be easily extended, since Stedman can also grab the license plates of the people who are offenders, to automatically send postcards to those people and remind them, get their car fixed up if we want to breathe clean air. Now, if we could get rid of 25% or more of our air pollution through a simple mechanism like this, where we just basically chide people, those are the kind of things I think should be tried first.
I think you're right, and it will certainly keep the feds from coming. In the next few months, we're going to have a statement of noncompliance from the federal government, so we're going to have a lot more regulations to live under.
Yeah, the whole thing about compliance is real funny, because they set the tests up for compliance in a way that it doesn't really mirror the true air pollution problem. The compliance test will say if you have a single occurrence at specific times a day, more than a certain number of days a year, And these, there are times of the day when it's worse. We have congestion problems around rush hour, so that's when they want to do their test. But in terms of actual quality of life and so forth, those peak numbers are irrelevant. People are tending not to do their exercise in the middle of the Texas heat anyway. The question is, how is the air in the morning and the evening when people are more out on the streets and getting their exercise? That's when we should be measuring. That's what we should be concerned about, is quality of our lives. And I think that's maybe something that, you guys who are tuning in who maybe are not libertarians, libertarians care deeply about this country and about the quality of our lives and about not only individual rights, but individual lives and happiness. And we're looking for innovative ways where people can live the lives they want to be and be successful and be creative and have fulfillment in their lives. And really that's the measure of what we want out of our society. I think our guests would agree with that.
Yeah, someone once said that libertarianism is what you already believe. You have the right to life, to liberty, the pursuit of happiness, the right to keep the fruits of your labor instead of having the government take it from you. You have the right to decide who you want to be, and then to carry that out without some outside influence saying, oh no, you have to do this.
Right. Of course, one thing is people don't necessarily understand that this is the kind of society and world that we have the opportunity to live in. This is the way our country was set up. Instead, a large number of people go through public schools and they get grilled into them that you will do as you are dictated to do. And of course, public schools, there's another big topic.
Oh yeah, there's a real pet peeve of mine. Every year, one of the legislators puts out a law that says students must learn how to be good citizens. And if you read the law, it says students must learn how to be good Nazis. And he calls that good citizenry. You train the students to obey authority. There's legitimacy in that, but too much and you get robots. And schools are turning out robots these days.
Oh, I wish. I wish the students were as reliable as robots and were as hardworking as some robots and so forth. But many of the students are really not getting their money's worth in terms of the education that our society is paying for. And it's very sad. There are lots of good jobs out there. There are lots of good paying jobs. And we got kids here who are not trained in the things they need to be trained in. They are not interested in learning about
It goes back before the schools. Kids are given from the very beginning the idea that they don't deserve, that they can't deserve to have that education. It's the marginalization that society imposes on a great number of people. The schools are part of the problem, but by the time kids get to school, they're ready to fail already.
So how does libertarianism really fit in as part of a solution for this problem? Because it is you're talking now about fundamental attitudinal problems.
Yes. Education, and I'm not talking about training students in schools. I'm talking about educating us, you, me, the adults out there, to realize how much more it costs to incarcerate a felon than it does to teach a student. To realize what we are wasting. My pocketbook is being drained because we are allowing young children to get into school expecting that they cannot learn. Enlightened self-interest is a major force. And when we finally understand that it's our problem, it's our benefit if we change it, then I think we've got a chance to work at it. But as long as there are people in power whose enlightened self-interest is to create cannon fodder or machine fodder or just people that they can plug into the machinery and go and make fortunes, then those children are going to continue to be told you can't do anything but go work in the machine. And some will do it and some will rebel. And of course, it's the rebels we have to worry about incarcerating later. But if we treat each person as a human being with, but divine potential, then we can stop throwing people away, and every one of us can stop paying the money that we're being forced to pay now to correct a problem that shouldn't exist in the first place.
Correcting these problems. Hey, here's another one that got corrected this last week, or supposedly is going to be corrected by our government. Did you know our government is putting too many of our young kids on drugs?
Ritalin, you mean?
Ritalin, yes. This is yet another place where the government has finally woken up to a problem that it caused, and then now is going to take credit for solving this problem. But really, the Ritalin problem is very interesting because I think it's deeply, it's a deep symptom of what some of the basic problems we've been just discussing. If it's easier for students, if it's easier for parents just to get their kids to pop a pill than to actually deal with what our youngsters need in terms of attention, in terms of the ability to go out and explore the world and be themselves.
That's what the commercials have been telling us are true for decades now. Have a headache, take a pill. Have a stomachache, take a pill. It's instant. It's solvable. All you got to do is quick. And when a solution doesn't come instantly, we've got to do something. We've got to give them Ritalin or whatever. But yeah, it's another thing that's endemic in the society and has to be changed inside all of us. There are almost no quick fixes.
Right. I mean, we're talking about actually getting to solutions for society. And, you know, there are no societal solutions. It's all really about people. We are sadly autonomous individuals. And till we can have direct brain-to-brain communication or something, it's going to be that way for a long time. But
when people understand that there is the possibility that they can freely determine the course of their own lives without stormtroopers on the one hand, the tax man on the other hand, the commercials on the one hand, and so on and so on and so on, including politicians, of course, then we can start working to change the society. But you're right, it has to be on an individual level. It almost makes no sense that we're the way we are today. It's just amazing.
You know, the other part about it from the standpoint of individuals is that there were studies recently about people who do their charitable giving, and there's so many people now who are doing extremely well in our country, and yet there's this mindset of, well, I don't really have to support the charities that help the disadvantaged because the government does that. And, you know, it used to be in this country that the government did not do that. We had churches, we had social organizations, and we had a better country for it.
We had volunteer organizations. The Austin Rape Crisis Center is one that springs to mind since I was a volunteer for it for 4 years. It got a little government money simply because it could, but it survived for years on simply the donations of the people and the businesses of Austin. Yeah, you're right. It can happen. It can really happen. You mentioned Mary Ruwart earlier. Some of her writings are excellent in terms of telling people how a libertarian society could be a caring society. And I recommend everybody find her book and read it. Listen to her campaign. She's got good ideas.
Well, folks, it's really been an engaging hour, and I'm glad you could spend some time with us. I've been your host, Rock Howard, here on March 25th, and our guest has been our state senator candidate for District 14, Tom Davis. Tom, thanks again for being here.
You're welcome.
We hope to have you back in the future on Live and Let Live.
And if you want to find out more about what I believe, my website's out there at www.tom-davis.org.
Gary, do we have that flip chart for Tom's campaign?
Seems not. Okay, I'll say it again.
Okay, say it again.
www.tom-davis.org.
Great, Tom. It's really been a pleasure. Folks, we're going to be here each and every Saturday. We're going to turn this country around, and we're get to the point where we can really go out and have a society where we do as we say, and it's live and let live. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next time. Oh, there's your chart, Tom. What do you know?